Hello, Joe from Joe K Models here. Right, so I did something in between the last episode and now, and and I think this is completely optional, but there's a line that runs just like the one in the back from this point on. So I decided to go ahead and fill that, give it a go on filling it, and I just used some sprue glue, and this is just Tamiya extra thin with some extra sprue in there, and then I just pretty much paint it on, and then I sanded it with I believe about a 250, a 600, and then a 1000 grit, and then I wet sanded it as well. So I just wanted to get rid of that line that goes from there, just in case you get the right angle looking in the cockpit, you might be able to see a little bit. So I went ahead and did a little filling with that. I don't think you're going to be able to see much. I don't think you're going to be able to see much of this anyway, but I didn't bother doing the back part because I don't think that's going to be visible. So did do that. I wanted to point that out. So now, since I've decided to paint these after assembling them to the side of the fuselage, I'm going to go ahead and get started with getting these cut out and ready to glue. So I'm going to get started on that. Okay, so I've got the pieces for the right fuselage cut out, and one of the things that is going to be inevitable with pretty much any plastic model build are eliminating the seam lines on the parts. So when the plastic is molded, there's two plates that come together, and then in the middle of those there's going to be a tiny seam, and I'm trying to hold it up in the light so that you can see right down the middle there is a seam. And I'm just going to take my hobby knife here and I'm just going to scrape that seam line right off, and it's going to be easier to do this with it still on the sprue like this. So I'm just going to leave it on here and do as much as I can. Then I'm going to cut that piece off and then do a little bit more cleaning, and then we can actually shoot primer on this ahead of time and see if we've completely eliminated that seam or not. So that's what I'm going to do now with these. Alright, so I got the pieces primed. I've been looking at them and they look pretty good to me. So I'm going to continue getting these off the sprue and gluing onto the fuselage half. You may have noticed that I also put primer on this piece as well, and I was just kind of testing it to see if I was still able to see that line or not. Under the right light you can just barely make it out, so I might do a little bit more sanding, but I think it looks pretty good like that. It's certainly not an obvious thing like it is back there, and I also sprayed there just to kind of show the difference. So I'm going to keep going and I'll check back in a second. And this last piece is right here. And if you remember from the previous one, this is the part that I had to scavenge from the additional extra piece. So let's see how we did with that. I like to put just a touch of the Tamiya thin on here, just to have it lock into place. It's like that. A little clumsy, but that's okay. And there you have it. And then I'll usually just do a little touch around it just to lock it in. But that will complete this side of it. And I think once this paint dries, I'm going to hit this with the primer before I end this episode and just see how everything looks in there. Alright, I'm plugging away on the other side of the fuselage here, and I just wanted to point out real quick how important it is to really study the directions. So I've got this piece here, and it looks like a series of different levers, and you know, if I had to guess with my eye, I would probably say that, you know, this might be good the way that it is, or this piece may need to be cleaned up. This piece looks like it's part of the other pieces here. But if you look closely, to the instructions here, you'll see that this bottom piece right here actually stays, and the piece that kind of looks like one of the levers actually gets cut off. So, you know, as I'm doing each one of these pieces, I'm being very careful to really study the directions and what they see. There's also different versions of the planes, and I'm doing version A, and some of the parts are a little bit different. So, alright, and I've got all of these pieces into place now on the other side, and just doing the same thing I did on the other half. These two up here are a little bit tricky to get into place correctly because they sit at an angle, but other than that, it's all done. And it's just amazing the amount of detail when you have those individual pieces like that. So I'm going to go ahead and get some primer on this and see how that turns out. Alright, and here's the result. I got the primer on there. So as you can see, good detail on it. I'm happy that I got rid of this line back there. But again, I'm just not really sure how visible this is actually going to be. I mean, you'd have to look at the exact right angle, and I mean, it is in bare metal silver, so you know, I decided to do that. If anything, it's good practice. But once you get the cockpit in there and everything, and I am going to have an open cockpit, so you're going to be able to see a little bit more than usual. So, just taking some precautions there. I had a little bit of extra primer, so I just hit these real quick with that. And I think this is a good spot to leave off. So, got a lot accomplished on this vlog. I will talk to you guys on the next one. This is Joe from Joe K Models.